Go start. Well, hello, Mrs. Powell and Mrs. Fawcett and Carosi's class. Welcome. We are here with Mr. Pinkney, illustrator, author, community member, father. He's got a great grandchild as well. And he's going to be doing some very exciting things and some he hasn't even done with our fourth and fifth graders. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pinkney. You can give him a wave.
Good. Well, good morning. Good morning again. So what I'm going to do is it gives you a little brief sort of description of what you see on the screen right now. And what you see is a grouping of a number of images that are sort of a cross section. It'll give you some idea of the different projects that I work on. Most of you are familiar with the fact that I'm a children's book author and illustrator. But you don't know about other projects, so I want to share some of those with you as well. On the left there is a self-portrait of me as a cowboy. I love the Westerns and I love the idea of the West. So I did this portrait. And by the way, this was done for the Eric Carle Museum. You guys know about the Hungry Caterpillar, right? Eric Carle. Well, Eric Carle he's a friend of mine as well, fellow artist and friend of mine. And his museum put out a book on becoming an artist. And I did this image for that particular book. On the right side, that is a 1820s freighter. And that illustration is from a new book, which is not even out yet. It will be published this fall of 2021, and it's called The Welcome Chair, and it's about immigrants in this country and the history of the immigrants in this country. So that is an illustration from that book. Next grouping. And I do lots of things in terms of where music is not only the inspiration, but also the subject. In this case, this is an album cover, which you guys would know, maybe a DVD or CD cover for a classical composer, Mahler. And so on the right side, often asked about an illustration is one of my favorite all-time favorites, and this one truly is on the top of the list, and it's the book cover for a picture book that I collaborated on with Julius Lester called John Henry, the Legend of John Henry. And it's an important image for me for a lot of reasons. I really think it's a successful image. And also, it's a story that was really incredibly important to me in my young growing up years. Next grouping. I use humor. You know, the two images that you saw, you know, that was just on the screen, was somewhat serious in tone, but I also use humor in my work. And in this case, you see that really evident in the fact that you have a giraffe. The giraffe is wearing reading spectacles or glasses. There's actually a reflection in the glasses of a book. And the pattern that's on a giraffe, you see those patterns shift from sort of random patterns to the shape of a book. This is all about for a cover for a reading review magazine, so it's about books and reading. On the right, really kind of important, my mother loved to read stories, and she read from the Aesop's Fables. I still think that it might be part of the curriculum of New York, the fables, Aesop Fables. And this was one that I really, truly liked. And I've done a lot of them, but this is the Boy Who Cried Wolf. Each of these fables have a moral. And of course, my book that most of you might know, which is a fable as well, is The Lion and the Mouse. On the right, there is a cover illustration for a novel, a young adult novel on the Mohegan Native American nation. And on the right, there is a drawing of a pheasant. And I actually have a taxidermy or stuffed pheasant here in the studio. And I keep running out of time, so I haven't shown it yet. But somebody's got to keep me on task, and even at the last moment. And that's by the way, the drawings that you see on the screen, have seen, are usually pencil and watercolor on paper. That's the medium. On the right, that's a pastel chalk drawing. And I'm going to do a demonstration of an eagle, and I'll share with you the use and the differences of working with pastel.
Real quick, Miss Powell, do we have some Furnace Woods friends here? All right, so one of the, I just wanted to, in Mr. Pinkney sketchbooks, I wanted to show you this one here for our owl friends.
We
Furnace
love our
Woods
owls.
Pinkney has their mascot as an owl.
Yes. Hey, by the way, I mean, I can still, it still amazes me, and I'm sort of lulled to sleep at night by the hoot of the owl. And there's a story that goes with that, but I won't go into that today. But plus, you guys know there are lots of owls in this area. Now, there's one thing I keep forgetting to talk about. I'm going to do it first thing. So, and that is the fact that there are, I've been illustrating books. And my first book was 1964, so it's a while ago. And since then, I've worked with and collaborated. Collaborated means working with someone. And I've collaborated with my wife, Gloria Jean, and we've done about 4 projects together. One of those projects was a book where she actually comprised and edited a book on spirituals. And this is the cover, which I did the illustrations for. And if I can do it really quickly, yes. My son, Miles, did artwork for it. And my son, Brian Pinkney, did artwork. So I've collaborated with my this is a book where my son Brian collaborated with his wife Andrea Davis Pinkney on a project, and I am so proud because this is my granddaughter book, which was published last year. This was her first book. She's now onto her 3rd book. So there's 7 Pinkneys, because Charnel's father and mother, Sandra and Miles Pinkney, also are children's book illustrators and writers. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Now, we're going to move through this today, and I'm going to make sure I can cover all the bases, or try anyhow. And so I'm going to start, and I like this. I did this in the last session where I read from a book, and then we go into the making or the process of the book. So what do you guys think about that? So this is a good. This is a poem that I love, and it's by Thylis Moss. One of the things I want to talk about, because when I was in are we talking about 2nd grade here, Mr. Cohen? Second grade.
Both second.
2nd grade is when I discovered that I wasn't reading as well as my fellow students. And it wasn't discovered until I was an adult that I have a learning disability. I'm dyslexic, but I didn't know that, when I was your age. I just knew something wasn't right. And nobody could figure it out, because when I was in, this was way back in the 40s, where they didn't really have a strategy for people who had, like myself, for young students that had a struggle and a challenge like they do today. So I'm bringing that up for two reasons. One, I want you to know that about me, and sometimes how hard I have to work. I love reading, by the way, and I'll share parts of my library with you. But also, when I talked about this book, Thylius Moss, I Want to Be, which is written in a form of a poem, when I really was trying my best to try to figure out how could I learn to read better, I chose poetry, and it's actually stayed with me. Poetry has been important to me in terms of inspiration. So I Want to Be by Thylius Moss. And the poem itself answers the question, which is the title, I Want to Be. Today, a lady, a man, another lady, another man, and my friend asked me, what do I want to be? I thought they were tired of waiting. So I said, I'll tell you tomorrow. I walked home slowly. I kicked up rocks and dirt that filled the air like tiny butterflies. I held a handful of river water, then I let go of it above my head like rain. I licked a patch of sunlight on my arm. I played hopscotch in footprints after I made them. I made a grass mustache, a dandelion beard, and a bird's nest toupee. Now, you're going to hear me talk often about the use of the imagination. In this case, what you see really on display is the imagination of the writer and the artist. Listen to this. The wind was a magician, and it turned me into a dancer. I danced until I was dizzy, and the sky turned into a lake. So I stood on my head and was a fish swimming in it. So you have the words, which are very imaginative, but look at my illustration. All right, I'm going to go back to the end of the book and sum this all up because I just love this. Okay. So she gets to the end of this poem, and there are all these questions about and answers to what she would like to be. I want to be language, a way to share thoughts. What my grandmother says when she speaks in tongues. That's also music. I want to be my other grandmother's hands when she signs, when she seems to be blessing everything. Here's the part I love. I want to be all the people I know. Then I want to know more people so I can be them too. Then they can all be me. I want to be a new kind of earthquake, rocking the world as if it's a baby in a cradle. And I love this illustration where it speaks about all people coming together. That's very important to me and my work. The last page. I want to be eyes looking everywhere. I want to be ears hearing everything. I want to be hands touching everything. I want to be mouth tasting everything. I want to be heart feeling everything. I want to be life doing everything. That's all. So how does the book start? Well, it starts with a writer. It starts with guys like you who write a story, right? And that story needs to be illustrated. That's when I come in. So you write a story and it goes to a publisher, and then the publisher contacts me and says, Jerry, we got this great manuscript. Would you like to illustrate it? And I would read it, and I could say yes or no for different reasons. In this case, of course, I said yes. And then they send me the text of the manuscript. And that's just in text form. It's just written out, typed out. And I get it without any kind of ideas for what the art is going to be. That's my job. That's the artist's job, is to look at and read the story and then figure out what's the best way to illustrate this particular project. Now, how do you start? Well, I start with what you call thumbnail sketches. Thumbnail sketch is a small drawing. Thumbnail, small. So it's a quick and easy way for the artist to get an idea of what you might want to illustrate. And you guys can do this. All these things that I'm sort of sharing with you this morning, you can actually do when you start a project. So in this case, I'll share with you some thumbnail sketches. So remember I said I get the text, it's typewritten. And then what I do is I take those sketches of the text, which you see here, and then I do these little drawings. And they're like shorthand, they're quick, they're like almost like visual notes. You know, it's just to get an idea of what the possibilities are for my illustrations. So, and I don't expect that I will get an answer right away, by the way. It could come after 2 or 3 or more of these small drawings. And I do pages of them. I'll give you an example. This is the text, and you see how many different starts or thumbnail sketches or visual ideas I might do. So that's done. Now, and I go through the whole book like that. And I'm trying to get a sense of what's important for me to develop into an illustration that you'll see eventually in the book itself. So once that's done, and I'm getting a sense of what's important, then I create what you call in the field a dummy book. And it's a model for how the book is eventually going to look. But it's a rough model. So what I do is I decide the size of the book, because every book is a different size, or most books are different sizes. And then I cut out sheets of paper twice the size. Now, you guys, I hope you're taking notes because you can do your own dummy book, right? And then I fold it in half, those sheets of paper. And then in order to hold it together like a book, I use a rubber band. And I just put a rubber band around the pages. And it feels like a bound book in a way. And then I take and make, from my thumbnail sketches, I make a decision of which drawing I think works best for the book. And then I literally draw into it almost as if it's a sketchbook what I think will work. And I just want to go through a couple of pages to share with you. This was the title page. And this is the start of the story, where I've actually put in place the text itself. And it's simply, I just tape it in place. I just tape it in place. So this is the start that accompanies most of the books that I've illustrated. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about briefly on growing up. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And I loved drawing, and I was encouraged to draw when I was very young, first by my parents, who always gave me something to mark on and to mark with. And I continued to draw. When I discovered that I was, dyslexic, I began to realize that I could actually contribute more in the classroom, because I really wanted to be a part of the classroom, that I could become, I could use my gift, because I realized I was able to create images very young and much better than a lot of my other students, the other students in my classroom, that I would use that gift as a way of making up for and contributing to the classroom. And so at times I had also teachers who appreciated that. And I became, in some of my classes, the class artist. So I was able to participate by doing something on the blackboard, that needed visualizing, that needed a picture, or if I were to hand in a paper or something like that, I could actually add a drawing to that as well. And that brought my marks up. And by the way, I was never a poor student. I was always a very good student. I just had some challenges. And I actually graduated from Hill Elementary School with top honors. I went on to junior high school, and then high school I studied art. And then from high school, I got a scholarship to the Philadelphia Museum College of Art. At the age of 13, though, I met my first artist, and his name was John Liney. I was selling newspapers at a very busy intersection in Germantown, and I had a newspaper stand, and I loved drawing, and I always had a sketchbook nearby, still have one nearby, and I would take a sketchbook and pencils to work with me. And oftentimes, if it wasn't, I wasn't selling a lot of papers and that corner was slow, I would actually take out my sketchbook and start to draw. And one of my customers who bought a newspaper from me was John Liney, who was a cartoonist. He asked me to share my drawings. I did, and then he invited me up to my studio. So today I'm going to invite you into my studio. And you see there, that's my work table or tabaret. And these are my work tools. This desk that's right behind me, and I'll get up and so you'll get a better view of it, is a drawing. There's a drawing from the book that I shared with you of the freighter in the very beginning. This is the table I do my drawing and painting on, mainly my watercolor. You'll see that there's my watercolor palette, as well as my tools, my brushes, the things that certainly are important to creating art. Now, I'm going to whiz through the studio so that we get some time for me to work on a pastel drawing that I'm working on. And you'll see as I sort of rotate around the studio, the my work tables. There are two. One I use for painting mainly, but sometimes drawing as well. And there's another table where you see there, which is where I do most of my drawing. These are working drawings, and you'll actually see on the drawing table a sketch from the book, my new book, which is The Little Mermaid. So you'll see lots and lots of plants in the studio. I love plants. My mother loved plants, by the way, and I think I got that from my mother. There's music. I love music. And here you'll see another table. I have lots of workspaces, and this is a workspace where I do a lot of writing. I also had to pay my bills from this table, by the way. my exercising bike, and then I have lots and lots of bookcases, and there you see a bookcase, and it's filled with books, and the subject is nature. So each of the bookcases have different books, and they're categorized, and that's on nature, and that's that out room there. You'll see more and more and more and more books, again, for research as well as inspiration. Here is a work table where I sort of organize and I keep at hand books that I'm using and when I'm in the process of creating a project. This is one that's been in the making for at least 8 years, and it's a memoir. And you can see that everything is in folders. I write, you guys know me as an illustrator, but I'm also a writer, and I write in longhand, in cursive, or sometimes I print. This is printed. I can go back and forth. And so I write in longhand, and then I work with someone who types it up for me and on the computer. So this is another work table. And on this end is the project that I shared with you, that dummy book. And here we have a drawing I'm working on that I will continue to work on. And it's the bald eagle, which is the mascot for the school. And the idea is that you'll get some sense of me at work. In this case, it's not watercolor, however, it is pastel. And pastel is a chalk. You'll see if I can tilt that down and maybe get a sense of. I shared with you my watercolor palette. This is the range of colors similar to the way my watercolor palette is set up. However, these are chalk sticks. This is the bald eagle. I tend to work oftentimes both with photographs and with memory. And what's so beautiful about the eagle and the bald eagle is, they're native to this part of the state, New York, and you see them, and that's always quite exciting. So I started this drawing with just an outline, which was a couple of sections ago, and then I'm going to start filling in. And I'm going to work on this area here on the left, because pastel, as you can see, you can blend with your hands. So I don't actually want to smudge this area. So I'm going to work on this wing here. And
Jerry, if you want, I'll jump in with some questions as you work. I think if you don't mind, maybe just tilting it a little higher. We see the beak, but not the top.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. All right, good. All right. Zeta said, how do you come up with books, and is it hard?
In most cases, it's an author writes a story and then presents that story to me. So the idea usually starts with a writer writing a story. Now, there are times when I write my own stories, and in that case, it's usually stories that I remember from my childhood, and then I begin by reading the text. So there are two ways. One is a collaboration, and the other is when I developed an idea for a story on my own. It usually takes me about 6 months to do a project. Is it hard? I tend to like, projects where I have to do a lot of research. So I tend to like projects where I have to find out things about the subject that I'm going to create for. And in that case, it is challenging. I try not to use the word hard, because what you want is you want to find yourself in that space or place where you have to work towards a goal. And if it's something that you are learning, then there's a learning curve that's there. That's important. So I use the word challenging. So you want a challenge because that's how you grow.
Thank you. How do you draw so well?
There's a lot of practice in there, you know, a lot of schooling. As I said, I went to a vocational school and studied art. I also went to art school and was, you know, there in art school, you had to explore, and it was all about learning to do something better. And so it is, but it's always about practice. I keep a sketchbook because I want to grow. So, but take anything that you do. It doesn't matter whether it's in sports or whether it's in history or chemistry. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And that's what you want to do. You want to choose something that will keep you excited, that you want to actually learn, and you want to grow, and you actually want it to be hard.
Couple questions about your book writing, you know, and you could feel free to lump in illustrating as well. How many books have you written altogether? How many do you do each year, give or take?
Yeah, I now am down to, I do one book a year. It used to be two, and but my books have become a lot more complicated. And you know, I've talked about learning to write, so that takes up a lot more time as well. But usually the number is, if I can do one book a year, and most of my books are very long, by the way. So one book a year.
Do you like using blending tools for your books?
I do. You know, it's like there's two different ways I work. One is the watercolors, you know, and watercolor is it's done in layers. So the blending, there is blending in watercolor, but it's mainly done with layer of from light to dark. So that's how you blend in watercolor. I love the fact that in pastels it's so different, and the blending comes from just color, mixing colors on the actual paper itself. And I always love the fact that the blending here, it can be done with your fingers. I love that.
So Scarlett's curious about plants. You want to talk a little about books that you've made involving plants?
I actually love plants, and I'm working on a project with the poet Nikki Grimes now. And oh, let me just show you. I'll share with you my sketchbook. And let's see. These are bracket fungus. And there's one drawing I want to share with you. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Oh, there's are common mushrooms. These are, by the way, found outside of my studio. And these are sketches that I've done with, these are plants, and I actually date them. There is one here that I want to share because I think it's so much fun. Oh, I love this. I was walking in the studio, and I had to sort of bend underneath a growing, flowering vine. And I said, oh, this is kind of a nuisance. I wonder if I should cut this back. And then I looked at it closely, and I discovered there was a ladybug, and then there were all these ants. So I took a quick photograph, and then I sort of started remembering what I saw that day, and I drew in the ants. So now you'll find in most of the books that I've illustrated, and somewhere in that book, there are going to be nature, or there are going to be plants, there are going to be, you know, animals or birds and whatnot. They're essential to me. I love living in Westchester County, and one of the reasons is that we're completely always surrounded by nature. And by the way, this is my sketchbook, and oh, there's a drawing. Interesting. I just started to close it, and here's a drawing I did of some of the plants, of my studio plants. So they're important to me. That's a good question.
Have you ever had any connections to Sonic the Hedgehog or Spiderman books, or those kinds of things?
No, I haven't. When I was a kid, for me, the superheroes was Captain Marvel and Superman and Spiderman. And even before that, I always say that my really superhero is, of course, The Legend of John Henry. Now, almost forgot, right? Let me slide this here. And this is my pheasant. And if you remember the drawing I did that we talked about in the very beginning was of this guy. So at one time I had an owl in the studio. I had a red-tailed hawk. Do you guys know T-Town? T-Town, well, it's not too far from here, of course. And I actually borrow the sort of taxidermy or stuffed animals from T-Town. I bring them here in my studio, and I do drawings. So I draw, we talk about nature and flowers. All those things are important to me. As an artist, I get an opportunity to express what I think about those things, what those things I care about in the art that I make. And then sometimes that finds its way into the books I create. And hopefully the books that I create find themselves in the school library, in your hands, and you get a chance to read them. And that's pretty special. I started out with most of my presentations with how important it is for me to find ways to express myself, and also find things that bring me sense of joy. I love what I do. And the beauty is of what I do is I'm also able to make a living to provide for my family. So any more questions, or how are we doing?
We have a couple more minutes. Have you ever been a part of a movie is one question. And then the other one is, have you ever made a book about school?
Oh, those are two interesting questions. I've not done a movie. I've had some of my books been animated into sort of short videos, but in terms of I've done projects where school, there has been a classroom scene, but not about a school. Why? You guys got some ideas? Anybody have any ideas?
Anyway, one kid wrote, "This is copyrighted." Sorry, no. I think that's it. Ms. Powell, did I miss anything? Or Mrs. Carosi? I think I'm looking at the other one here.
It looks good.
All right, and this is coming along well, I think.
So again, for those of you that this is the, let me see, the fourth session with Mr. Pinkney. It started a blank piece of paper. We have 2 left tomorrow, and then he's going to be presenting it to BV. But we got to see like the behind the scenes, and he's taken a picture after each session, so you could see what, from beginning to end, this process.
Yeah, and you know what, I was taking out my camera to shoot the last session, and then an art was delivered, and I never got back to it. But I'll do the first thing. I'll take a shot of how it's going at this point, and then we'll go from there. But it's coming along.
I want to just remind everybody that Mr. Pinkney has encouraged everybody, if you want to share your art, I know some teachers have some thank yous you might be working on, but he is happy to see your artwork, whether you take a picture and if you're doing electronically, or we'll get it to Mr. Pinkney. But keep it going, do those sketchbooks, and hopefully you were inspired, like many of us, by Mr. Pinkney.
Guys, have a great day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pinkney, and thank you, Mr. Cohen, for inviting all of us. This was really incredible. On behalf of all my students that are remote, I'd like to say thank you. This was such a wonderful opportunity. So boys and girls, can we give a little electronic round of applause to Mr. Pinkney and Mrs. Fawcett's class? Nice to see you. Just quickly to my students, if you would please join me on